The Kethvar Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years with absolute certainty that they had eliminated the greatest threat to their empire. Earth was nothing but cosmic dust now, scattered across the void where the blue-green world once orbited its yellow star. The humans were extinct, wiped out in a single devastating strike that had become legend among the Dominion's military academies. Admiral Zexthera stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the routine patrol of the former Sol system. Nothing remained here except the cold vacuum and distant planets that had witnessed the execution of an entire species. The asteroid belt held more debris than usual, but that was expected. 3 millennia of cosmic forces had scattered Earth's remains across the system. "Admiral, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the outer system," reported Commander Velchris, his voice carrying the mechanical precision that all Kethvar officers maintained. "Long-range sensors are picking up multiple contacts beyond Neptune's orbit." Zexthera's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic display. The Kethvar had been the undisputed masters of space warfare for longer than most species had existed. Their technology was supreme, their fleets unmatched. Whatever these contacts were, they posed no threat to the Dominion. "Probably debris or rogue asteroids," Zexthera said dismissively. "This system has been unstable since we removed the third planet. Continue standard patrol protocols." The energy signatures grew stronger. Then, stronger still. What had appeared to be distant asteroids began moving with purpose, accelerating toward the inner system with impossible speed. The objects were massive, each one larger than a Kethvar dreadnought, but they moved with the precision of fighters. "Admiral, those aren't asteroids," Velchris said, his voice losing its mechanical calm. "They're ships. Hundreds of them." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Zexthera felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of military service: uncertainty. The ships approaching were unlike anything in the Dominion's extensive databases. Their design was angular, aggressive, built for destruction rather than elegance. Strange markings covered their hulls, symbols that seemed familiar yet impossible. "Run a full-spectrum analysis," Zexthera ordered. "I want to know what species built those ships and how they managed to hide in this dead system." The analysis took precious minutes as the unknown fleet continued its approach. When the results appeared on screen, Zexthera's blood chilled. The markings weren't from any current galactic civilization. They were from extinct records, from historical archives that the Dominion had sealed away 3,000 years ago. The symbols were human. "Impossible," Zexthera whispered. "We destroyed them all. We watched their planet burn." The lead ship, a massive vessel that dwarfed even the Eternal Conquest, began transmitting. The message came through on frequencies that hadn't been used since the Old Wars, in a language that was supposed to be dead. "Kethvar Dominion vessel, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We have returned to reclaim what was taken from us. You have exactly 60 seconds to surrender before we demonstrate what 3,000 years of preparation has accomplished." Zexthera stared at the transmission origin. The voice was calm, controlled, speaking in perfect Kethvar translation protocols. But the underlying tone carried something that made his warriors' instincts scream warnings. This wasn't the desperation of a dying species or the bravado of upstart rebels. This was the cold certainty of predators who had spent millennia planning their hunt. "Open a channel," Zexthera commanded, forcing authority into his voice. "Unknown vessels, you are trespassing in Dominion space. Identify yourselves properly and explain how you obtained Kethvar military frequencies." The response came immediately, and this time it carried video. The face that appeared on screen was unmistakably human, but changed. The woman's eyes held depths that spoke of centuries of life, enhanced and extended beyond natural limits. Her skin showed the slight shimmer of genetic modifications, and, when she smiled, Zexthera saw teeth that were too perfect, too sharp. "We are exactly who we claim to be, Admiral Zexthera of the Eternal Conquest. Yes, we know your name, your ship, and your complete military record. We've been watching your empire for a very long time. The humans are extinct," Zexthera said, though his certainty was cracking. "We have proof. We destroyed your homeworld." Admiral Chen's smile widened, showing those predatory teeth. "You destroyed one world, Admiral. Did you really think a species capable of interstellar travel would keep all their eggs in one basket? We had colonies, generation ships, research stations. You killed 8 billion humans on Earth, but 12 billion more were scattered across the galaxy. The truth hit Zexthera like a plasma bolt to the chest. The Dominion's intelligence had been incomplete. In their arrogance, they had assumed that destroying Earth would end humanity entirely. They had never searched for survivors, never considered that humans might have established footholds beyond their homeworld. 30 seconds, Admiral, Chen continued. We're not interested in your surrender because it would change nothing. We're here to collect a debt that's 3,000 years overdue. Every Kethvar in this system is going to die, starting with your flagship. Zexthera's tactical training took over. He began issuing orders, calling for defensive positions and weapons targeting. The Eternal Conquest was a state-of-the-art warship with shields that could withstand planetary bombardment and weapons that could crack moons. Whatever these human survivors had built, they couldn't possibly match Dominion military superiority. The human fleet finished its approach, and Zexthera got his first clear look at their vessels. Each ship was a masterwork of engineering that shouldn't have been possible. They incorporated technology from dozens of different species, but welded together with innovations that were purely human. The hull showed signs of battle damage that had been repaired and reinforced rather than replaced, telling a story of 3 millennia spent fighting and surviving. Time's up, Admiral Chen announced. The lead human ship fired a single shot. The weapon that emerged from the human vessel wasn't energy or projectile, but something that seemed to bend space itself. It struck the Eternal Conquest's shields and passed through them as if they weren't there. The exotic beam punched into the ship's hull and began to spread, causing matter to simply cease existing at the molecular level. Zexthera watched in horror as sections of his flagship vanished into nothingness. Emergency alerts screamed throughout the bridge as compartments lost atmosphere and crew members were consumed by the expanding void. The weapon wasn't just destroying the ship, it was erasing it from existence. All hands, abandon ship. Zexthera shouted, but he knew it was too late. The disintegration field was spreading faster than his crew could reach the escape pods. Admiral, came Admiral Chen's voice over the comm system, which somehow still functioned despite the ship falling apart around him. Before you die, I want you to understand something. Every human who survived Earth's destruction swore an oath. We would find every Kethvar in the galaxy, and we would make them pay for what they did to our world. 3,000 years we've spent preparing for this moment. The disintegration field reached the bridge. Zexthera's last sight was Admiral Chen's face on the main screen, watching with calm satisfaction as the Dominion's most powerful warship simply ceased to exist. Across the Sol system, the human fleet spread out to engage the remaining Kethvar patrol vessels. Each engagement lasted only seconds. The humans had spent 3 millennia studying their enemies, learning their weaknesses, developing weapons specifically designed to counter Dominion technology. What had once been a routine patrol became a massacre. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of her flagship, the Remembrance, watching the tactical display as the last Kethvar ship was eliminated. Around her, officers who had been born in the cold void between stars worked with quiet efficiency. These were humans who had never seen a natural sky, never breathed unfiltered air, never known anything except the long journey back to this moment. All targets eliminated, Admiral, reported Captain Martinez, whose family had maintained their ship's engines for 40 generations. No Dominion vessels remain in the system. Excellent, Chen replied. Begin Phase 2. I want deep space monitoring stations established at the system's edge. Any Kethvar ship that approaches gets the same welcome we just provided. The human fleet began to spread throughout the system, claiming what had once been their home. They had returned not as refugees or conquerors, but as something far more dangerous, survivors with a purpose. For 3,000 years, they had planned this moment, building an entire civilization around the goal of revenge. Admiral, came a voice from the communications station. We're receiving transmissions from the hidden colonies. The other fleets are ready to begin their operations. Chen nodded. The attack on Sol was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, human fleets were emerging from hiding places that had been prepared centuries ago. The Kethvar Dominion had grown complacent in their victory, never realizing that their greatest enemy had spent 3 millennia becoming something far more dangerous than they had ever been before. Send the signal, Chen ordered. Operation Reckoning is now active. It's time to remind the galaxy what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. As her words traveled across subspace networks that the Dominion didn't even know existed, human fleets throughout the galaxy received their orders. The war for Earth's revenge was about to begin, and the Kethvar would learn why humans had once been considered the most dangerous species in known space. The Sol system belonged to humanity once again, but this was just the first step. The real work was about to begin. Supreme Commander Thexmore of the Kethvar Dominion received the first reports while reviewing territorial expansion proposals in his orbital palace above the capital world of Kethprime. The initial transmission seemed impossible. An entire patrol fleet had vanished from the Sol system without sending a distress signal. Such things didn't happen to Dominion forces. Replay the last communication from Admiral Zexthera's fleet, Thexmore commanded, his forearms manipulating the holographic controls with practiced ease. The Dominion's most senior military commander had not achieved his position through sentiment or mercy, but through absolute tactical superiority. The communication log showed routine patrol reports until a specific timestamp, then nothing. No emergency broadcasts, no tactical warnings, no indication of any threat. An entire fleet had simply stopped existing in the span of minutes. "Sir, long-range sensors detected brief energy spikes consistent with weapons fire," reported Intelligence Director Kavlin, her voice carefully neutral. "But the signatures don't match any known technology in our databases." Thexmore's tactical mind immediately began calculating possibilities. Pirates were impossible in the Sol system, nothing valuable remained there. Rebels couldn't acquire weapons capable of destroying Dominion dreadnoughts. The only logical explanation was interference from one of the other galactic powers, but none of them were foolish enough to attack the Dominion directly. "Deploy the 3rd Battle Group to investigate," Thexmore ordered. "I want Admiral Rexthor to conduct a full reconnaissance of the system and report back immediately." The 3rd Battle Group was the Dominion's rapid response force, equipped with the most advanced ships in the fleet. If something had indeed destroyed Zexthera's patrol, Rexthor would have the firepower to deal with it decisively. Admiral Rexthor received his orders while conducting training exercises near the galactic core. His reputation was built on swift, overwhelming responses to any threat against Dominion authority. The idea that something in the dead Sol system could pose a real danger seemed absurd, but orders were orders. "Set course for the Sol system, maximum jump speed," Rexthor commanded from the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Wrath. "I want to know what happened to Zexthera's fleet." The journey took 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. As the 3rd Battle Group emerged from their final jump, Rexthor expected to find debris fields and, perhaps, some indication of what had occurred. Instead, he found an active human fleet waiting for them. The tactical display showed dozens of ships positioned throughout the system in perfect defensive formations. Each vessel was larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Dominion's historical records of human technology. They moved with the coordination of a military force that had been training together for centuries. "Admiral, we're being hailed," reported his communications officer, voice trembling slightly. "The transmission is coming from the largest vessel, and they're using Dominion military protocols." "Put them through," Rexthor said, his confidence beginning to waver. The ship leading the human formation was massive, easily twice the size of his own flagship. Its hull showed the scars of countless battles, but every weapon system was operational and targeting his fleet. The face that appeared on his screen was human, but enhanced beyond natural limits. Admiral Chen looked exactly as she had 3,000 years ago, preserved by technology that the Dominion didn't fully understand. Her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had spent millennia planning for this exact moment. "Admiral Rexthor," she said, speaking his name with casual familiarity. "Welcome to Sol System. I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. Your predecessor Admiral Zexthera was quite cooperative in providing information about Dominion military capabilities before his ship was eliminated." Rexthor felt his blood freeze. Zexthera had been one of the Dominion's most experienced commanders, and his fleet had been destroyed without even sending a warning. The implications were staggering. "Human, you are in violation of Dominion space," Rexthor said, forcing authority into his voice. "Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Chen's smile was predatory. "Admiral, you seem to be confused about who's violating whose space. This is the Sol system, birthplace of humanity. You're the invaders here." "Humanity is extinct," Rexthor declared, though his certainty was cracking. "The Dominion eliminated your species 3,000 years ago." "You eliminated one world," Chen replied. "Did your intelligence services really believe we were confined to a single planet? We had colonies throughout this galaxy, generation ships exploring beyond it, research stations in dimensions you didn't even know existed. What you destroyed was our homeworld, not our species. The truth hit Rexthor like a physical blow. The Dominion's great victory had been incomplete. They had eliminated the most visible target while leaving the true threat to grow in the shadows for 3 millennia. What do you want? Rexthor asked, his tactical mind already calculating the odds of fighting his way out of the system. Justice, Admiral Chan replied simply. Your empire murdered 8 billion innocent civilians. We've spent 3,000 years preparing to collect payment for that debt. The Dominion acted in self-defense, Rexthor said, though he knew how weak it sounded. Humans were expanding too rapidly, acquiring too much influence. You were becoming a threat to galactic stability. We were becoming competition, Shen corrected. Your empire couldn't tolerate the existence of a species that might eventually challenge Kethvar supremacy. So you decided to commit genocide. The human fleet began to move, ships taking positions that would allow them to engage Rexthor's forces from multiple angles. Their coordination was perfect, speaking of commanders who had trained together for centuries. Every movement was calculated to maximize their advantages while minimizing his options. Admiral, Chen continued, I'm going to offer you something we didn't offer Zexthara. You have 1 minute to order your ships to surrender. Any vessel that complies will be allowed to evacuate its crew before being destroyed. Any vessel that resists will be eliminated with all hands aboard. The Dominion does not surrender, Rexthor said, though his voice carried less conviction than his words. Then, you'll die like Zexthara did, Chen replied. But, first, let me show you what 3,000 years of preparation looks like. The human flagship fired a demonstration shot at a small asteroid in the system. The weapon that emerged wasn't energy or projectile, but something that seemed to fold space around itself. When it struck the asteroid, the massive rock simply ceased to exist, leaving nothing behind except a brief ripple in local spacetime. Quantum dissolution beam, Admiral Chen explained conversationally. We developed it specifically for Kethvar armor composites. Your shields won't stop it, your hull won't deflect it. When this weapon touches your ship, it erases the molecular bonds that hold matter together. Rexthor stared at the empty space where the asteroid had been. His ships carried the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy, but they were designed to counter known weapon types. This quantum dissolution technology was beyond anything the Dominion had encountered. 30 seconds, Chen announced. All ships, combat formation. Rexthor ordered, abandoning any pretense of negotiation. Target the human flagship and fire at will. The third battle group opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, particle beams, and antimatter missiles streaked toward the human fleet in a display of firepower that could have sterilized a planet. The humans didn't even attempt to evade. The Dominion weapons struck human shields and simply stopped, absorbed by defensive systems that bent the attacks around their ships like water flowing around stones. Not a single human vessel took damage from the concentrated firepower of an entire Kethvar battle group. Our turn, Admiral Chen said. The human fleet responded with weapons that defied every law of physics the Dominion understood. Quantum dissolution beams reached across space to touch Kethvar ships, causing them to unravel at the molecular level. Gravimetric disruptors created localized black holes that crushed vessels into singularities before evaporating. Temporal displacement weapons aged entire ships into dust in seconds. Rexthor watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed by technology that shouldn't exist. His ship's weapons couldn't penetrate human defenses, while human weapons ignored Dominion shields completely. It wasn't a battle, it was an execution. Admiral, the Dominion's Wrath is the only ship left, reported his tactical officer, voice breaking with panic. Rexthor looked at his tactical display and saw that it was true. 37 ships of the third battle group had been reduced to expanding clouds of molecular debris. His flagship floated alone among the wreckage, spared for reasons he couldn't understand. We're being hailed again, his communications officer reported. Admiral Chen's face reappeared on the main screen. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful, as if she had just completed a routine exercise rather than destroyed an entire battle group. Admiral Rexthor, your ship has been spared so you can carry a message back to your superiors, she said. Tell them that this is only the beginning. Human fleets are emerging from hiding throughout the galaxy. We have weapons your scientists can't understand and patience your warriors can't match. The Dominion will mobilize every ship in the fleet, Rexthor said desperately. You cannot stand against the combined might of our entire empire. Admiral, we've been fighting your combined might for 3,000 years, Chen replied. The difference is that you didn't know we existed. We've had plenty of time to study your tactics, infiltrate your command structure, and develop countermeasures for every weapon in your arsenal. The human flagship moved closer to Rexthor's damaged ship. At this range, he could see the details of its construction: hull plates that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, weapon systems that incorporated technology from dozens of different species, and markings that told the story of centuries spent in deep space. Return to Keth Prime, Admiral Chan ordered. Tell your Supreme Commander that humanity demands the immediate surrender of every Kethvar military officer who participated in Earth's destruction. We have complete records of who gave the orders and who carried them out. And if the Dominion refuses? Rexthor asked, though he already knew the answer. Then, we'll take what we want by force, Shen said. Starting with Keth Prime itself. The transmission ended, leaving Rexthor alone on the bridge of his crippled flagship. Around him, the Sol system buzzed with human activity as engineering ships began converting asteroids into defensive platforms. They weren't just visiting their former home, they were reclaiming it permanently. His damaged ship limped toward the hyperspace jump point, carrying news that would shake the Dominion to its foundations. Humanity had returned, armed with impossible weapons and driven by 3,000 years of carefully nurtured hatred. The galaxy was about to change forever. The emergency session of the Kethvar High Command convened within hours of Admiral Rexthor's return to Dominion space. Supreme Commander Thexmore stood before the assembled military leadership, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of absolute authority, but his confidence had been shaken to its core. The threat is real, Thexmore announced to the gathered admirals and generals. Humanity has not only survived but evolved into something far more dangerous than we eliminated 3,000 years ago. Admiral Rexthor's report had been detailed and terrifying. The humans possessed technology that rendered Dominion weapons useless while wielding weapons that could erase matter from existence. Even worse, they had spent millennia studying Kethvar tactics and capabilities while remaining completely hidden. How many ships do they have? Demanded Fleet Admiral Corvex, commander of the Dominion's home defense forces. Rexthor's estimates seem impossible. At least 12,000 vessels confirmed in the Sol system alone, Rexthor replied, his voice hollow from the trauma of watching his entire fleet destroyed. But intelligence suggests they have forces positioned throughout the galaxy. They've been preparing for this for 3,000 years. The number sent shockwaves through the assembled commanders. The entire Dominion fleet numbered approximately 8,000 ships, accumulated over millennia of conquest and expansion. If the humans truly had 12,000 ships in one system, the implications were catastrophic. Sir, we're receiving multiple distress signals from frontier sectors, reported Communications Director Velkris, his mechanical voice carrying unusual urgency. Human fleets are attacking Dominion installations across 17 different systems simultaneously. Thexmore felt the foundations of his empire crumbling beneath him. The Dominion had ruled through overwhelming military superiority, but that advantage was being systematically dismantled. The humans weren't just seeking revenge, they were executing a coordinated campaign to destroy Kethvar power throughout the galaxy. Show me the tactical situation, Thexmore commanded. The holographic display materialized above the conference table, showing the galaxy with red indicators marking human attacks. The pattern was clear, they were targeting key military installations, supply depots, and communication networks. Each strike was precisely calculated to maximum damage to Dominion infrastructure. They're not conquering territory, observed General Tefkor, the Dominion's leading strategic analyst. They're crippling our ability to respond. These attacks are designed to isolate our fleets and prevent coordinated defense. Reports from Sector 7, Velkris continued. Admiral Kexthor's second fleet engaged a human task force near the Rigel system. The entire fleet was destroyed in 18 minutes. No survivors. The assembly fell silent. The second fleet had been one of the Dominion's most experienced formations, veterans of dozens of campaigns. If they could be eliminated so quickly, no Kethvar force was safe. Sir, came another report. The humans are broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies. They want the immediate arrest and delivery of every military officer involved in the destruction of Earth. Thexmore's warrior pride flared. The Dominion had never surrendered to any enemy, had never bowed to foreign demands. To consider capitulation now would betray everything the Empire stood for. The Dominion does not negotiate with terrorists, he declared. We will mobilize every available ship and crush this human insurgency. Sir, with respect, Admiral Rexthor interrupted, these aren't insurgents. They have technology we can't counter and resources we didn't know existed. A direct confrontation will result in the destruction of our entire military. Then, what do you suggest? Thexmore demanded. That we surrender our empire to these primitives? They're not primitives anymore, Rexthor said quietly. 3,000 years of survival in deep space has changed them. They've incorporated technology from dozens of species, developed weapons specifically designed to counter our defenses, and built a civilization dedicated entirely to warfare. The truth of his words was reinforced by incoming reports. Human fleets were appearing throughout Dominion space, striking with surgical precision before disappearing into hyperspace. They moved like ghosts, appearing long enough to eliminate key targets before vanishing without a trace. The Nexus Prime Military Academy has been destroyed, reported Velcris. The humans broadcast a message before the attack, this is where you taught officers to commit genocide. It will never train killers again. Thexmore realized the humans weren't just seeking military victory, they were targeting the cultural foundations of Kethvar power. Military academies, training centers, command schools, all the institutions that had created the Dominion's warrior culture were being systematically eliminated. Deploy the first armada to Kethprime's defense, Thexmore ordered. If the humans want to attack our capital, they'll face our entire home fleet. Sir, the first armada is already engaging human forces in the outer system, Velcris reported. Admiral Hexthor reports that enemy ships appeared without warning and began attacking our orbital defense platforms. The holographic display shifted to show the battle raging around Kethprime. The Dominion's most powerful fleet was engaged in desperate combat with human vessels that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. Quantum dissolution beams were tearing through Kethvar dreadnoughts while gravimetric weapons created localized space distortions that crushed entire squadrons. How did they get past our sensor networks? Demanded Corvex. Nothing should be able to approach the capital undetected. They didn't approach, Rexthor said grimly. They were already here. The humans have been infiltrating our territory for decades, maybe centuries. They know everything about our defenses, our patrol routes, our command protocols. As if to confirm his words, explosions began erupting throughout the command center. Emergency alerts screamed as sections of the orbital palace lost atmosphere. The humans hadn't just attacked the outer defenses, they had somehow penetrated the most secure facility in the Dominion. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Expeditionary Fleet, came a voice over the emergency communication system. Kethvar High Command, you are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now or face the consequences. Through the massive windows of the command center, Thexmore could see human ships materializing from stealth fields. They had been hiding in plain sight, invisible to every sensor the Dominion possessed. The most secure facility in the galaxy had been compromised without anyone detecting the intrusion. How? Thexmore whispered. Sir, we're detecting massive power signatures throughout the palace structure, reported a technician. The humans have placed demolition charges in critical support areas. They can bring down the entire facility if we don't comply. The realization hit Thexmore like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just infiltrated Dominion space, they had penetrated the heart of the Empire itself. They could have assassinated the entire High Command at any time, could have crippled the government whenever they chose. Instead, they had waited, gathering intelligence and preparing for this moment of absolute victory. Admiral Chen, Thexmore said, activating the communication system. This is Supreme Commander Thexmore. What are your terms? The human admiral's face appeared on the main screen. She looked exactly as she had in the previous confrontations, but now Thexmore could see the weight of 3,000 years in her eyes. This wasn't just military strategy, this was personal vengeance carried out on a galactic scale. Unconditional surrender of all Kethvar military forces, Chen said without preamble. Complete disarmament of your fleets. Immediate arrest and delivery of every officer involved in Earth's destruction. Reparations to be determined by human tribunal. And, if we refuse? Thexmore asked, though he knew resistance was futile. Then, we demonstrate what happens to species that commit genocide, Chen replied. We have weapons capable of cracking planets, Supreme Commander. We could turn Keth Prime into another asteroid belt if we chose. The command center shuddered as another explosion echoed through the structure. Human forces were systematically disabling the palace's defensive systems, proving that resistance was impossible. You have 10 minutes to decide, Admiral Chen continued. After that, we begin executing captured Kethvar officers until you comply. Thexmore looked around the command center at his assembled officers. These were warriors who had conquered dozens of species, had built an empire that spanned half the galaxy. Now they sat in stunned silence, faced with an enemy that had rendered their entire civilization obsolete. Sir, we have no choice, Admiral Rexthor said quietly. They can destroy us completely if we resist. The Dominion has ruled for 5,000 years, Thexmore said, his voice breaking. We brought order to chaos, civilization to barbarian worlds. You brought tyranny and oppression, Admiral Chen's voice cut through the command center's speakers. You rule through fear and violence, destroying any species that might challenge your supremacy. That ends today. Through the windows, Thexmore could see the battle in space ending as Dominion ships powered down their weapons and shields. The First Armada, the most powerful military force in the galaxy, was surrendering without firing another shot. Across the Empire, other fleets were receiving similar ultimatums and making the same choice. 9 minutes, Admiral Chen announced. Thexmore closed his eyes and made the decision that would end an empire. All Dominion forces, this is Supreme Commander Thexmore. Cease hostilities and prepare for unconditional surrender. Comply with all human demands immediately. The words felt like poison in his throat, but he knew they were necessary. The alternative was the complete extinction of the Kethvar species, and even his pride couldn't justify that outcome. Wise choice, Admiral Chen said. Human forces will begin occupying Dominion facilities immediately. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. As Thexmore watched human ships take control of his capital system, he realized that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The age of Kethvar dominance was over, replaced by something far more terrifying, a species that had survived genocide and emerged stronger than ever. The humans had returned to exact their vengeance, and they had succeeded beyond their wildest ambitions. 1 year after the fall of the Kethvar Dominion, Admiral Saracen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station above Earth's restored surface. Below her, the blue-green world sparkled in the light of Sol, its continents reshaped by 3 millennia of careful terraforming and planetary engineering. The Earth that humanity had rebuilt was not the same world that had been destroyed. It was better, designed from the ground up to support not just human life, but the dozens of alien species that had joined the new human confederation. Where the Kethvar had ruled through fear and oppression, humans had built something unprecedented, a truly cooperative galactic government. Admiral, the War Crimes Tribunal is ready for your testimony, announced Captain Martinez, her aide-de-camp whose family had maintained the same ship's engines through 40 generations of exile. Supreme Commander Thexmore and his staff are scheduled for final sentencing today. Chen nodded, though part of her felt conflicted about the proceedings. The trials had been fair, more fair than anything the Dominion had ever provided to its victims. Every accused officer had been given legal representation, access to evidence, and the right to defend their actions. Many had been acquitted when evidence showed they had not participated in the genocide or had actively opposed it. But, for those who had given the orders or carried them out with enthusiasm, justice had been swift and certain. How is the integration process proceeding? Chen asked as they walked through the station's corridors. The walls were lined with memorial plaques bearing the names of the 8 billion humans who had died when Earth was destroyed, but also the names of countless other species that had suffered under Kethvar rule. Better than expected, Martinez replied. Former Dominion worlds are adapting to the new government structure. The Zelhari delegation specifically requested to join the Confederation rather than return to independent status. That news pleased Chen more than any military victory. The Zelhari had been among the Dominion's most oppressed subjects, their peaceful nature making them ideal slaves. The fact that they trusted humanity enough to voluntarily join the Confederation spoke volumes about how different this new government truly was. The tribunal chamber was located in the heart of the station, a vast space designed to accommodate representatives from every species in the galaxy. Chen took her place at the witness stand, looking out at an assembly that would have been impossible under the old regime, former enemies sitting beside former victims, united in their commitment to justice and peace. Supreme Commander Thexmore sat in the defendants section, his forearms restrained but his dignity intact. Even facing execution, the former Dominion leader maintained the bearing of a warrior. Chen could respect that, even as she prepared to testify about his crimes. Admiral Chen, began Prosecutor Tvek, a member of the Andorian species that had suffered greatly under Kethvar rule, please describe for the tribunal the conditions that humanity encountered during your 3,000-year exile. Chen activated the holographic display, showing images that few beings outside the human fleet had ever seen. Ships traveling through the void between galaxies, generation after generation born in the cold vacuum of space, entire civilizations dedicated to a single purpose, survival and eventual return. We became nomads, Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of those lost centuries. Our ships were our worlds, our fleets were our nations. We learned to adapt, to incorporate technology from every species we encountered, to turn necessity into strength. The images showed human vessels growing larger and more sophisticated over time, incorporating salvaged Kethvar technology, abandoned alien artifacts, and innovations born from desperate need. What had begun as refugee fleets had evolved into something unprecedented, a civilization built entirely in space, unbound by planetary limitations. During this time, did humanity encounter other Kethvar forces? Tvek asked. Frequently, Chen replied. The Dominion had hunting fleets specifically tasked with finding and eliminating human survivors. We fought hundreds of engagements over the centuries, always at a technological disadvantage, always outnumbered. More images appeared, battles fought in the void between stars, human ships using guerrilla tactics against superior forces, entire fleets sacrificing themselves to allow others to escape. The story they told was one of gradual learning, each engagement providing new intelligence about Kethvar capabilities and weaknesses. These encounters taught us everything we needed to know about our enemies, Chen continued. Their tactics, their technology, their psychology. We studied them the way prey studies predators, learning every detail that might help us survive. When did humanity decide to return for revenge rather than simply seeking a new home? Tvek asked. Chen was quiet for a moment, remembering the debate that had raged through the fleet councils for decades. Some had argued for finding a distant galaxy and rebuilding in peace. Others had insisted that the Kethvar threat would eventually follow them anywhere they went. We realized that the Dominion represented a fundamental threat to all intelligent life, she said finally. Their empire was built on the principle that other species existed only to serve Kethvar interests. As long as they remained in power, no civilization would ever be truly safe. The prosecutor displayed evidence of other genocides committed by the Dominion. The Vorthan crystal cities turned to glass, the aquatic Merti forced to watch their oceans boil away, dozens of species completely erased from existence because they had developed technology that might someday challenge Kethvar supremacy. The destruction of Earth wasn't unique, Chen testified. It was standard Dominion policy. Any species that showed potential for growth or advancement was eliminated before they could become a threat. From the defendants section, Supreme Commander Thexmore rose to his feet. The tribunal had granted him the right to question witnesses, though few expected him to use it. Admiral Chen, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding fleets, humanity has now demonstrated technological superiority over every other species in the galaxy. How do we know you won't repeat the Dominion's mistakes? It was a fair question, one that Chen had been expecting. The human fleet possessed weapons that could crack planets and defensive systems that rendered conventional warfare obsolete. In the wrong hands, that power could create a tyranny far worse than the Dominion. Because we've learned the cost of such thinking, Chen replied. We spent 3,000 years as refugees, hunted and homeless because someone decided we were too dangerous to exist. We know what it's like to be the victims of genocide. But power corrupts, Thexmore pressed. Today you speak of justice and cooperation, but what about tomorrow? What happens when the next generation of humans forgets the lessons of exile? Chen smiled, though there was sadness in it. That's why we built the Confederation the way we did. Power isn't concentrated in human hands. Every major decision requires consensus from all member species. We've deliberately created a system that prevents any single civilization from dominating the others. The holographic display showed the new government structure, a complex web of checks and balances that distributed authority across dozens of different species and cultures. Former Dominion subjects sat on councils beside their former oppressors, united in their commitment to preventing future genocides. The human fleet remains the Confederation's primary military force, Chen continued, but we answer to a civilian government that represents everyone in this galaxy. If we ever tried to use our power to oppress others, the entire Confederation would unite against us. Pretty words, Thexmore said. But the Dominion began with similar ideals. We sought to bring order and civilization to a chaotic galaxy. How do we know humanity won't follow the same path? Chen looked directly at the former Supreme Commander, seeing in his eyes the genuine belief that his empire had been a force for good. That was perhaps the most dangerous thing about the Dominion. They had convinced themselves that oppression was civilization, that genocide was necessary for galactic peace. Because we've built something you never did, she replied. We've created a system based on cooperation rather than domination. The Dominion ruled through fear because that's all you understood. We offer something different, partnership. The evidence supported her words. In the year since the Confederation's founding, dozens of former Dominion worlds had voluntarily joined the new government. Trade flowed freely between species that had been enemies for millennia. Research stations shared technological advances with anyone interested in learning. The tribunal will now deliberate on sentencing, announced Chief Justice Valcara, a member of the Crystalline Assembly whose people had been among the first to suffer Kethvar aggression. The defendants will be held in comfortable detention while we consider the evidence. As the assembly filed out, Chen remained at the witness stand, watching Thexmore being led away by human guards. The former Supreme Commander moved with dignity, accepting his fate without complaint. In another time and place, he might have been a hero rather than a war criminal. Admiral, came a voice behind her. Chen turned to see Director Tell of the Refugee Resettlement Authority, a former Dominion slave whose species had been liberated during the human offensive. The new colony ships are ready for departure. 17 species have requested assistance in finding new homeworlds. Approved, Chen said immediately. Make sure they have everything they need for the journey. This was what victory really looked like, not the destruction of enemies, but the opportunity to help former victims build new lives. The human fleet that had once been dedicated entirely to survival and revenge was now being used to explore uncharted regions, establish new colonies, and provide protection for species seeking fresh starts. Admiral, there's one more thing, Tell said hesitantly. We've received a request from a group of Kethvar civilians. They want to establish a colony far from the core worlds, somewhere they can build a peaceful society. Shen considered this carefully. The Kethvar species itself wasn't evil, they had simply been shaped by millennia of military culture and imperial doctrine. Given the chance to build something different, they might surprise everyone. Granted, she said. But they'll need to accept Confederation oversight and agree to strict non-aggression protocols. They've already agreed to all conditions, Tell replied. They just want the chance to prove that Kethvar can be more than conquerors. That evening, Chen returned to her private quarters aboard the Remembrance, looking out at the restored Earth through her viewport. The planet that turned slowly below was home to billions now, humans returning from exile, former slaves building new lives, refugees from dozens of worlds finding sanctuary. It wasn't the Earth that had been destroyed 3,000 years ago. It was something better, a symbol of hope rather than a target for destruction, a meeting place for civilizations rather than the heart of a single empire. Her communication system chimed with an incoming message. The holographic display showed her granddaughter, Admiral Lisa Chen, commanding officer of the exploration fleet that was mapping the galactic edge. Grandmother, we've made contact with the hegemony delegation, Lisa reported. They're interested in establishing trade relations with the Confederation. Chen smiled at the news. The hegemony ruled the neighboring galaxy and had been watching the fall of the Dominion with great interest. Opening relations with them would expand human influence beyond their home galaxy for the first time. Excellent work, Chen replied. Remember, partnership, not conquest. We're explorers and traders now, not warriors. Understood, Lisa said. Though the fleet is ready if anyone threatens Confederation space. Let's hope it never comes to that, Chen said. But, if it does, we'll be ready. As the communication ended, Chen reflected on how far humanity had come. They had begun as refugees fleeing genocide, evolved into warriors bent on revenge, and, finally, emerged as leaders of a cooperative galactic government. The journey had taken 3 millennia and cost billions of lives, but the result was a galaxy where genocide was no longer possible. The Kethvar Dominion was gone, replaced by something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization built on cooperation rather than conquest. It wasn't perfect, no government could be, but it was just, it was fair, and it offered hope for the future. Looking out at the stars, Admiral Sarah Chen allowed herself to feel something she hadn't experienced in 3,000 years: peace. The long war was over, and humanity had not just survived, they had created something worth surviving for.